leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Doesn't it? 1.85 million people signing a petition saying that Trump should have the invitation to come to the UK withdrawn. And MPs are debating it in Parliament, and protests are taking place in Westminster and elsewhere as we speak. And we will in a moment cross live to our reporter on the ground. But bear in mind, please, this is not just ordinary folk out protesting. This has some quite significant political support. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, thinks that his trip should be suspended because of his controversial comments and potential ban on immigration. Tim Farron thinks the visit should be put on hold. John Bercow, well, as you know, didn't want him to speak inside the Palace of Westminster. We even have Conservatives like Alistair Burt, the former Foreign Office Minister, says that the optics are very bad and there should be a joint decision to delay the visit. And they're lining up, many of them, to say that Trump should not come to our country. So the question is it ever right to ban a foreign leader from visiting our country because we simply don't agree with his or her opinion? Well, my view on that is clear. It's madness. It's ludicrous. I mean, we've had Robert Mugabe visiting the country. We even had a war criminal, Japan's Emperor Hirohito, in years gone past, visit the country. And here we have the democratically elected leader of the United States of America and a friend of our nation, and there are people that want to ban him from coming. I think the whole thing is mad. But if you think I'm completely wrong, if you think we should ban Trump, and perhaps you've got a long list of people you want to ban, well, then let me know. And to get involved, you can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live on LBC's Facebook page right now from here in the swing state of Michigan, a state that Trump won, one of the many in the Midwest that he won. Should we ban this man or any other from coming to our country when they lead their nation because we don't like their views? I wonder what Steve in Kings Langley makes of that proposition. Steve, good evening.
Hello, mate. How are you doing?
I'm all right. What do you think?
I think you're great to start with, Nigel. I think you're just the best man in the world's politics now. I just want to tell you that. But regarding the way people are talking down this country, these Remainers are deliberately trying to sabotage so that they think that they can win in the end by saying, I told you so. I think it's just pathetic.
Hang on, Steve. Steve, do you think, Steve, the people that are protesting right now in Whitehall against Trump coming to the country, do you think they're all Remainers?
I would say probably 85% are. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Okay. Listen. I live on a canal. Okay, I live on a canal boat. Uh-huh. I travel all over the Midlands, right through London. I have massive conversations with all sorts of people, rich people, poor people, all sorts of people, every colour you can think of, every religion. And I can tell you now that the people the further you get into London, the more these people have no idea of reality. They have no idea of reality. Absolutely no idea. They do not know how the other half lives. No
Are they a small minority, Steve? Are they a small minority?
No, not in London, no. Not in London, no. They're the large majority in London. And most of them are white, incidentally. They're trying to deliberately sabotage what's happening. This country will be great. It is a great country. And I'm just hoping, what are we going to say, Nigel, if Le Pen wins the presidency in France in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, or Geert Wilders, they're not coming over as well? Is that what we're going to say? I mean,
do you know what? Do you know what, Steve? I think these protesters would like to ban anybody that they don't like, and we're seeing much of this behaviour actually going on throughout our universities, where even someone like Jermaine Greer got banned from visiting Bristol. Steve, I'm with you. I think you're right. I think the vast majority of these anti-Trump protesters are Remainers. I think they're all the same people. I think they sign every petition going, and I think they've got to get with the real world. Steve, I thank you for your call. I move next to Lorraine in West Worcester Park. Lorraine, what do you make of this attempt to stop Trump visiting the United Kingdom?
It's absolutely absurd. Absolutely undemocratic.
Mm-hmm.
And,
well, it's certainly, yeah. I mean, would it be democratic if Parliament was against him coming?
No.
Parliament. I mean, actually, the point is, Lorraine, as I understand it, and perhaps somebody listening can correct me, but as I understand it, the invitation for Trump to come to the United Kingdom, actually, it's a state visit, so it's the Queen. It's the Queen who invites him to come to the United Kingdom. So presumably, what all these protesters are trying to do, and these people signing petitions, is to put the Queen in a very embarrassing position, I'd have thought.
Absolutely. These people are not in the real world, and they're all bemoan, you know, they're all the Remainers, like the last call, totally, it's the last caller was absolutely got it on the chin. It's all the same sort of people, nothing against students, but those sort of people, not living in the real world, living in the middle of the countryside, and, you know, it's, I just can't, it's just absolutely absurd.
Lorraine, something has gone wrong. I believe something has gone wrong with some of our young people in this country, in that they now are of a state of mind where if they have a different view to you, they think you shouldn't be allowed to hold your view. They think you should be banned from saying it, and that is fundamentally undemocratic and anti-democratic. Lorraine, I get your frustration. We're going to cross now live to our LBC reporter, Vincent McAvilly, who's down in Parliament Square. Vincent, what's going on down there?
Well, Nigel, we are expecting around 20,000 people here tonight. That number had turned out about 3 weeks ago, but there's around 4,000, 5,000 people here on Parliament Square. They're very vocal. They've got lots of signs calling for Trump to be impeached. EU one saying, "I'm a person, not a bargaining chip." And they've been hearing from a number of speakers on the stage, MPs like Naz Shah and Diane Abbott. I've also spoken to Labour's Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, who told me why he thinks Trump shouldn't come for a state visit.
Because I don't believe that Donald Trump deserves a state visit to this country. The state visit is an honour. It's usually, well, it's an honour to world leaders, and it's a way in which we're consolidating a relationship with a world leader, and the way in which I suppose we will work with that world leader in the future. I don't think Donald Trump deserves that honour. For his behaviour in terms of his statements, the misogynistic statements against women, what he's doing to migrants within his own country, these attacks, which many have described as racist against Mexicans, this attack on people who are simply seeking refuge in his country, the way in which he's been discriminatory in terms of the closing of borders, particularly from Muslim countries. I don't think he deserves a state visit, and I just don't think it will help in the relations between our two countries.
But other people like Robert Mugabe and Chinese presidents have had state visits in the past. They're oppressors of human rights. Why is there such a strong feeling now? Why did you come down and express that sentiment so strongly here?
Well, we've expressed the same sentiments in other world leaders as well. We raised the issue about human rights with the Chinese. And with Robert Mugabe, I've been involved in protests against visits by Robert Mugabe, particularly with regard to the ways... I've met many people from Zimbabwe who've been treated so harshly by his regime. So we've been consistent about that. I just think this is a wrong move, and I wish Theresa May hadn't been part of the process of ensuring this invitation went ahead. I think it will cause this country embarrassment in the short term, and it won't do our relationship with the rest of the world in the long term either.
And finally, what will you and your Labour MPs do if he is granted the state visit and comes to Parliament? Will you see him speak? And how big do you think the protest will be in London during that visit?
Well, I'm hoping the thing's called off. I'm hoping that they'll think again. if Donald Trump is coming, I won't be attending meetings with him, to be frank. Others may well, in terms of other parties might well do, and government ministers may well do, but I think this state element of the visit, this honour, this award of an honour he doesn't deserve, and I'm not going to be party to that.
Now, I've been speaking to protesters in the crowd here, and it's fair to say they are quite divided about this. Some of them do not think he should be bestowed the state visit with all the pomp and ceremony and respect that gets. But some of them do want him to come here just on a visit so that they can protest. And organisers tonight point out that the petition which MPs are now debating in the Commons to ban him from making a state visit had over 1.8 million signatures. So if Donald Trump does come, as Sir Bernard Haugenho revealed is likely to be in June on LBC a few weeks ago, it's likely that we would possibly see, they think, the biggest protest London has ever seen, certainly as big as the one against the Iraq War.
Vincent, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was John McDonnell that he was interviewing there, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and he thinks Trump's an absolute disgrace. He wouldn't mind if it was the IRA or Hamas. No, that's absolutely fine, and he may have grey hair and be getting on a bit, but he sounds like he's still a student activist. That is my view. I am absolutely astonished at the arguments that are made. We're fine to have despots from all over the world, people who genuinely have committed terrible human rights abuses, but we're not prepared to have a man who was elected on a very clear manifesto that he's trying to put in place. It is absolutely crazy. I think it's self-defeating, and I'm pretty certain that the government and indeed the Queen will not listen to these protests, will not withdraw this invitation. It will continue. It needs to. It should. This relationship between us and the USA is absolutely crucial, particularly in a post-Brexit world when we've got the chance to reach out. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC and live from Michigan. It's 7:15.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show, live from Michigan. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Is it right to ban a foreign leader just because you don't like his or her view? Well, I don't think it is. It's crazy. You may as well ban free speech. Oh, come to think of it, most of this lot that are out protesting want to do that as well, because these are very similar types of people, and certainly the same politicians who, if you remember a few years ago, wanted to ban Nick Griffin from appearing on BBC's Question Time. It happened in late 2004. And they all lined up. People like Peter Hain, the Labour MP at the time, said if Griffin appeared on Question Time, he would sweep the country with his rhetoric. And, of course, in the end, he did appear on BBC's Question Time. He was a complete flop, and the beginning of the end of the British National Party was begun. The point about free speech, the point about hearing people and listening to them, is if they have got bad agendas, if they are duds, they will get exposed and they will get found out. So why, folks that are out there protesting and signing petitions, why not get Donald Trump to come to the United Kingdom? Why not make sure he gets interviewed, he gets interrogated, listen to what he has to say, as opposed to what the liberal media tell you he says. And your texts and tweets on this are coming in. The debate about President Trump's state visit is vulgar. What on earth has happened to our good manners? The invitation has been issued and accepted. Tiffany in Chelsea says that. Well, Tiffany, it's the Queen's invitation. That's the point I'm making. And a tweet here, Nigel, will these protesters be standing up to Sharia law and defending women's rights? A tad hypocritical, if not. No, they won't. Whoever comes from parts of the world where Sharia is prevalent will not be meeting protests like this, I can assure you. Evening, Nigel. I don't care one way or the other. But since you're such a good friend with Trump, how much is his visit going to cost us? Because we all know he's going to bring along all his kids, plus hundreds of people, anonymous. Well, look, I tell you what, he'll be organising his own transport, OK? So if all his kids want to come with him, that's fine. What will the cost be? The cost will be policing those that are demonstrating. So maybe the answer is we just send John McDonnell the bill. I don't know. It's an idea. Our first caller after the break is Melania. I nearly said Melania in Trump Tower, New York, but actually, Melania, you're in Hythe, I understand.
I am, and I'm incognito. That's not my real name. Can I give you a compliment before I make my point?
Well, you can try.
I don't agree. Okay, I don't agree with you politically, but I enjoy listening to you because quite a lot of what you say is good, old-fashioned, basic common sense. And whenever someone disagrees with you or you disagree with them, you always do it in a faultless, polite way, and that, to me, means a lot.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Melania. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, what about this visit?
My husband absolutely adores you. He voted for your party.
So there's a bit of a... Okay, so whether the country is split or not, there's certainly a house in Hythe that is.
Yes, we've been that way for over 30 years, so we're going to keep future in it. I didn't vote for Trump, obviously, and I'm not a Trump fan. However, I think the visit, rather than ban him, defer it for a while. Because, as you know from your frequent trips to the States, there's a little bit of a question mark hanging over this presidency at the moment with what the security services have revealed or leaked or whatever you want to call it about possible ties, maybe not with him, but certainly with people around him to Russia. That's the first point. And the second point, I don't like what they're trying to do to the press in the United States with this fake news, fake media, with all the major networks. I mean, even Chris Wallace, who is an esteemed media journalist, who is, I suppose, equivalent to your David Dimbleby, Mike Wallace, Chris Wallace, were our Richard and David Dimbleby. Even he had a pushback at Reince Priebus on Fox News on Sunday because Priebus was inferring that maybe the White House or maybe what people around Trump in the White House should tell the media what to say, and that offended him. So I think rather than ban the visit, defer it, maybe for a year, because Obama got a state visit, but I think he got a state visit after he'd been in office for a year or so.
Well, that's true.
Maybe defer.
That's true, Melania, but the circumstances here are different. You know, the world has changed. America has just changed direction completely. In fact, in many ways, it's changed by 180 degrees, and you could argue so did the United Kingdom last year with the Brexit vote. So I think that's the reason why I think Mrs. May was keen to get over to Washington as quickly as she could. Some said it was because she hated the fact that I was the first person to go and see him, but I'm not going to believe that of our Prime Minister, obviously. So time is of the essence because we're going into a new world. We're having a completely new debate about NATO, for argument's sake, where Mrs. May can be a very important bridge. So I don't buy the argument about deferring it. However, I take the points you're making. Look, the press hate him. The press are at war with him, just as many elements of the press, not all, but many elements of the press, hated me and were against Brexit. And I think what Team Trump have decided to do is just not to take this daily barrage of abuse, but to fight back. You may be right in a sense. Maybe things have gone a little bit too far.
Trump has done in the United States. He's made people of all stripes engage politically with their representatives. And that is something that hadn't been done for years. So I will give him credit for that. Although some of them are engaging against him, but they're forcing their representatives to listen to them and work for them. And that is democracy. Yes.
Oh, I think that's right. And I mean, fun enough, I think one of the first phone-ins I did at Melania on LBC, one of the first calls I got, a bloke rang in. He said, Nigel, thanks to you, I went out in the referendum and voted for the first time in my life. I said, oh, that's terrific. He said, yes, I voted to remain because you annoyed me so much with you. So either way, what is happening is there's a rebirth in democratic debate in both this country and in America, and clearly in that house in Hythe. And I thank you very much indeed for your call. Graham Smith says on Facebook, Nigel, what about us? What about us that want Trump to come here? Well, Graham, those of us that want Trump to come tend to be people who don't go out and protest on the streets or sign petitions. But I'm quite sure, Graham, I'm entirely confident that we are in the majority. Rat Williams says, that's why we're protesting. We want a free democratic society where our rights aren't stripped away. Yeah, get the point. get the point that it is people's right to protest in a free society, but what worries me is this element in this country who don't say, I disagree with your point of view, they say, I want you banned. You should not be able to come and speak at my university. You should not be able to come and visit this country. You should not appear on British media and be allowed to make your arguments. Yes, protest is part of a free society. Banning people really, genuinely, is not part of our tradition. That's what I believe anyway. What does Stephen in Dagenham make of this? Stephen, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. It's great to speak to you.
So, should we ban people because we don't like their opinions?
No, I think it's completely and utterly hypocritical if we do that, because if we decide to ban Donald Trump, then we should ban half the leaders in the world.
Quite.
I mean, we posted people from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, China, countries that have got horrible human rights records, and I think the majority of these protesters are completely and utter hypocrites.
What is it, Stephen, about Trump that makes people so angry when they're prepared to accept, a visit from the Emir of Kuwait or whoever else it may be? What is it about Trump that really gets under their skin?
I think he's just changing the status quo. I think basically he's saying it as it is, and he's saying a lot of things that basically they just don't like.
Yeah. I tell you what it is also, Stephen. They lost. They lost the Brexit vote. They all backed Hillary and she lost, and they don't like losing, and they're bad, rotten losers. Isn't that the short of it, really?
That's it. That's it, right in a nutshell. Absolutely.
Good man, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. We go next to John in Henley-on-Thames. John, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I believe if we stop the Donald Trump state visit, which, as you say, is a visit from our Queen, it would be the biggest mistake this country has made since Tony Blair took us into the Iraq War. People did not demonstrate against other countries' leaders in their own countries having torture, etc., etc., and are virtual dictators. Why didn't they demonstrate then? Why?
I know. And it's just like, this criticism I made of John Bercow, who is still Speaker of the House of Commons, folks, hopefully not for long, that, Bercow was happy to meet anybody, wasn't he? Tyrants from all over the world, people who wanted homosexuals imprisoned and didn't believe women should be able to drive motor cars and all the rest of it, and yet there's something about Trump that's got under their skin. I suppose some would argue.
He speaks his mind. He speaks his mind. And he speaks, I think, for the majority. I think Donald Trump's visit to this country is crucial for our future.
Well, John, I tell you something, I'm absolutely convinced, whatever John McDonnell or Farron or any of these people say, whatever the protesters do, I'm absolutely certain that this visit of Trump's is not going to be cancelled. There's no chance of it. The invitation's gone out, and he will be here. Text and tweets. Evening, Nigel. Seen as though your mates were President Trump, tell him he's welcome at my house any time for a brew. Why he even wants to visit Parliament when there's such a bunch of hypocrites is beyond me. Nigel, Mr. Trump may be a dinosaur, but he's not a monster. I like dinosaurs. Sadly, they're now extinct, and that comes from Ted. Don't forget, you can follow all of this on LBC's Facebook page. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Michigan. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysikos.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC, live from Michigan. Call 0345 6060 973.
We're discussing whether foreign leaders should be banned from coming to our country because we don't agree with their point of view. And, of course, it's Trump that we're talking about. But very interesting. I'm here in Michigan today, and I've been back and forth to America quite a bit over the course of the last few months. We always think of the Americans as being very insular and not really being interested in what happens in other parts of the world particularly. Let me tell you, they are talking still about Brexit, about Europe, about the upcoming elections, much more than they ever did before. And in fact, it's been the source of the latest row that the 45th president of the USA has got himself into. Here's what he said in a big campaign-style rally in Florida on Saturday.
Here's the bottom line. We've got to keep our country safe. You look at what's happening. We've got to keep our country safe. You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible. You look at what's happening in Brussels. You look at what's happening all over the world. Take a look at Nice. Take a look at Paris. We've allowed thousands and thousands of people into our country, and there was no way to vet those people. There was no documentation. There was no nothing. So we're going to keep our country safe.
So, Trump talking about Europe and doing a campaign rally. I have a feeling he'll go on doing campaign rallies for all 4 years of the presidency. It's what he loves doing. He loves to engage. The problem is there wasn't specifically an incident in Sweden that took place on Friday night. What he said and tweeted out was actually it had been a broadcast on Fox News, but nobody quite managed to get hold of what Fox News programme it would have been. And this gets to the heart, I think, of why Trump is such a controversial figure. He stands up and does a speech like that. He doesn't do it with notes. He doesn't do it reading off a script. He does it from the heart. He does it as a person. He says an awful lot of things. And if one or two of them aren't absolutely perfect, he then gets condemned by the media. And some may argue rightly, but he gets condemned by the media. However, as so often is the case with Trump, in terms of direction of travel, what he was saying was very valid. There have been no specific terrorist attacks in Sweden, but pro rata, Sweden have taken more young male migrants than any other country in Europe. And there has been a dramatic rise in sexual crime in Sweden, so much so that Malmö is now the rape capital of Europe, and some argue even the rape capital of perhaps the world. And there is a Swedish media who frankly just don't report it. And if those comments by me on Sweden have enraged any of you, then please feel free to call. If you agree with the protesters who were down in Parliament Square saying Trump shouldn't come, please, I'd be very happy to hear from you. I'm going to ask Kathleen in Wokingham. Kathleen, should we ban foreign leaders that we don't like?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. And I'm with you, Nigel. My friend and I came up on, stood on Westminster Bridge to watch you come up the Thames to help the fishermen. And we also saw Bob Geldof screaming abuse at you. This is not democracy. What's happened to democracy? I've watched Fox News quite a lot, and I saw an interviewer in the street speaking to students and asking them why they were protesting and why they were causing damage, and they couldn't answer. They cannot answer what they're doing and why they're doing it. This is not democracy. And they're being brainwashed in schools, they're being brainwashed in universities, and I think that those universities that have allowed this to happen should be closed down or chuck those people out and make their parents make them find a job and get a life.
Kathleen, you are very passionate. I'm pleased that you came to watch the fishing protest, and I'm pleased that you saw Bob Geldof trying to shout down protest. Not just protest from me, but from ordinary working people. Kathleen, something somewhere has gone wrong. We've got people in our society now who don't disagree with us. They think we shouldn't be allowed to express our opinion. And I thank you for the call. I'm going next to Charmy Ann in Hemel Hempstead. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. It's my first time calling you. I'm a bit nervous, so please forgive me for that.
Please don't be. Just get it off your chest. Get it off your chest. Say what you think.
Well, I think that Donald Trump should be welcomed into our country. He is the President of the United States, who's a very, very good friend of our country. Mm-hmm. I think people that are demonstrating should have many more things they could demonstrate, much more worthwhile. How minorities are treated in other countries, FGM against women, so many other things they could demonstrate against. And this John McDonnell, he just wants to get on with looking after other things, because I can't believe why anybody should really not want Donald Trump to come. Some people are offended by what he says.
Why is it that they've never spoken? Why is it these people have never spoken out before and tried to ban anybody else from coming? Why is that?
I think it's crazy. I mean, some women are offended about what he says. Personally, he doesn't offend me. If they choose to be offended by things he says, then that is up to them. I choose not to be offended because, frankly, he's not offensive. He sometimes, I think, says things a little bit off the cuff, and maybe he should have some advice on speech writing, because most Most people in his position have professional speechwriters doing it for him, and sometimes I think he maybe puts his foot in it a little bit too much, but he's a good guy. I've got family in America, in Virginia, in North Carolina, in New York, in Florida. They're all Trump supporters.
The thing is, Charmy Ann, the thing is, Charmy Ann, if you turn him into the kind of politician that's like all the others, where they play safe, they want to virtue signal the whole time, and they literally read a speech word for word, then you've got another dull, boring, careerist, professional politician. He's not that. He's speaking from the heart. And do you know what? I agree with you. Once or twice, he goes over the top. He says things that may not be wholly accurate, but that's what you get when you've got the politics of passion, and that's what he does well. And as a first-time caller, I hope you'll call us again. We haven't put you off.
We should welcome him with open arms. He said some lovely things about our country, and you know, and also the thing with Russia. At the end of the day, they say, don't they, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Now, I'm not suggesting that Russia's an enemy, but we have to converse with people, we have to liaise with people, we have to communicate with people, and again, Putin, we have to communicate with him.
Yes, and Putin, of course, who has been on a state visit to this country in the past. Charmy Ann, thank you for your call. I've no doubt we'll hear from you again. I'm going to ask Ed in Mill Hill, should we ban foreign leaders that we don't like?
Hi, Nigel. Again, first time calling.
Well done.
I signed the petition to ban him, but I've changed my mind, changed my view, because I think it would be an interesting demonstration of democracy in action, in a way. But
why, Ed, did you sign it in the first place? Ed?
I think cancelling a state visit would have been a strong signal for the May government to send, but obviously they're not willing to do that. But I think what the state visit is rubber stamped by the Queen, but it's chosen by the government. So it's quite an interesting signal that as one of Theresa May's government's first state visits, she's invited Donald Trump in his very early days. So it's a signal from the government that they are.
Ed, can I ask you?
Donald Trump's.
Ed, can I ask you something, Ed? Ed, can I ask you, what made you sign this petition? Was it your peer group at work or university? I mean, what sort of age are you?
No, mid-30s. I think fairly independent thinker.
Right.
I think in the same way, inviting Vladimir Putin for a state visit would be interesting, but I don't think as a country we'd want to align ourselves to his views of the world.
Well,
but this is a signal.
Well, Ed, Vladimir Putin has been to Britain. He did visit Britain. In fact, most world leaders come and visit Britain, and you don't tend to get much in the way of protests. It's just Trump that seems to have enraged people, and he obviously upset you. But, Ed, you changed your mind, which is really interesting, and I thank you very much for your call. I thank you very much for your call. Texts and tweets, my problem is that the petitions are not to ban him, they're about withdrawing his state visit. I am against giving him the honour of a state visit, something that you choose to ignore, Nigel, says Matthew in Chessington. Well, Matthew, the point is that it is a state visit. That's how it's been organised. Whether it was a state visit or whether it was a political visit to go and speak, to a group of parliamentarians, either way, it's not that different, other than this invitation has actually come from the Queen. Nigel, you and Trump speak your minds, and people don't like to hear the truth and can't believe how badly they're getting it wrong. That's from Tony. If Trump didn't do anything idiotic, and in 1 year's time the meeting could take place with considerably less issues involved, it should go ahead. Nigel, I've just cracked it. All these demos are because they've got nowhere else to go. In other words, they don't have a decent enough argument to put together. Or is that they don't have two brain cells to rub together, Claire in Harlow? That's harsh, Claire. They've just been misled, in my opinion. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively here on LBC, live from Michigan. It's 7:45.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Michigan, only on LBC.
They're protesting outside Parliament Square. They're protesting in the House of Commons. There are people saying they don't want Trump to come to the UK. They want the state visit to be withdrawn. But even if it wasn't a state visit, they don't even want him to come to our country. And I'm asking you, can it be right to ban a foreign leader just because you don't like their point of view. Andrew Phillips on Facebook says, mainstream media is becoming just as progressive and liberal as the many political elites that despise us for voting Brexit and liking Trump. As long as there are sore losers protesting against the US president's visit to the UK, the mainstream media will always paint them in a good light. Some truth in that, Andrew, and certainly here in America, it is all-out war between this president and the mainstream liberal media. No need to buy theatre tickets anymore. You just watch the evening news in America and you watch the media and the president slugging it out. Jason Yates says on Facebook, he's the president of the USA and he hasn't done anything against us. I think people forget that. Mary Longmore says, as an elected president, he should be welcomed into the country. We need America badly for trade treaties. And once again, I think what we're seeing here is a very vociferous minority, but they're a really, I think, I could be wrong, tell me I'm wrong, I think they're a very small minority. I wonder what Todd in Islington thinks. Todd, are you part of that small minority?
Absolutely not.
Right, okay.
I'm a musician. I work the blues scene around Europe and the States, and I've seen a malaise over the last 20 years, which is affecting both sides of the Atlantic, and it's prevalent all over Europe as well. It's a malaise that's really, I mean, there used to be a political equation where politics were purely opinions, different opinions as to how a country should be run, and they were mutually respected. What we've seen from the left over the last 20 years is this growing misperception that they represent the moral high ground and that somehow they have God or ethics on their side. It's therefore all of a sudden this sort of equation of, the Darth Vader fighting the rebel force and they're all the rebel force. It's a form of fundamentalism, and that's effectively what fundamentalists are. They believe they have God on their side, and for that reason, there's no mutuality, there's no mutual respect. It's the belief that, well, if you're against us, we have a right to close you down, because at the end of the day, we represent right. It's a very, very scary prospect.
Yes, Todd, I think you put your finger on it beautifully, and it's what I've been echoing this over the course of the last few weeks, that an older generation, it seems to me, in the country, very often can argue about politics and disagree about politics, but respect, the Voltairean principles, respect the right of somebody else in a democracy to have a different view. It's predominantly coming from the younger people who think that people who hold opposing views are disgusting, are wrong, are bad, should be closed down, banned. And is it coming from the education system, Todd? Where's it coming from?
Well, let's not forget that the education system, also on both sides of the Atlantic, has always been effectively administrated by liberals. Always has done. So, that's possibly got a fair bit to do with it. It's also to do with, I think, the fact that the media have swung with it, and the fact that there was this misbelief that the consensus had held over the last 20 years. We saw a lot of this becoming apparent through the Blair years over here, that somehow. That somehow this moral high ground was a consensus view. Somehow the cultural war had been won by the left. And now they're finding, this very belief is what's created these populist revolts, the one that you led as far as Brexit was concerned. That we saw it in the UK election 2 years ago. This belief that but surely because we're right, because we have morality on our side, we are the consensus view, and they're so terribly shocked to find out at the end of the day that there is nothing.
They're not. And they were effective, Todd, weren't they? I mean, Blair was so successful that he managed to get us to a position where even to discuss immigration was equated directly with being racist. And I remember in 2004 speaking out on 8 and then a couple of years after that 10 former communist countries joining the European Union with free movement to the UK, and I stood out against it, and I was called all the names under the sun for daring to have a debate and an argument that was perfectly normal. Todd, fascinating call. Thank you very much indeed. Your texts, you can't justify Trump. He's all out lying as he's at his rallies as speaking from the heart. It's misleading people intentionally. No, I don't believe that it is all out lying. I think he was talking about Sweden in general terms. But, if you speak off the cuff, you won't get everything 100% right. And your tweets, we do not want a misogynistic, fascist, racist, bigot Trump here. That's anonymous, which is very disappointing. Nigel, a protest against Trump is a protest against the system of democracy in the USA. Yes, I agree. I think it is. Although, democracy, the Electoral College, votes in California, it's a whole different topic. But I wonder what David in Colchester. David, do you think we should ban anybody coming from our country whose views we don't like?
Nigel, it's nice to talk to you. Thank you for taking my call. No, I don't.
Good
because, as you say, some years ago we had the Japanese emperor here, and if I remember rightly, the Burma veterans in the Mall, when he rode up in his carriage, they turned their backs on him in protest, if I remember rightly. And I think that spoke more eloquently than any ban can ever do. So they invited him here. It was a state visit. But if you don't agree, that's fine. Say you don't agree, but don't ban someone. That's ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. That's fascism in itself.
Yes, it is. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Those who point the finger and scream j'accuse at other people are invariably, it seems to me in the modern world, actually guilty of that crime themselves.
Exactly. And I think you said that John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn were on this protest this evening, I believe. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I don't quite get their sort of stand when they're quite happy to invite what I consider enemies of our country. Previously.
I know.
With the IRA.
What? McDonnell was there tonight. But actually McDonnell and Corbyn are joined at the hip in their friendship with Jerry Adams and all the rest of it, and their support for certain Palestinian groups that have been pretty close to violent terrorists, pretty close to. David, I think your voice is the majority voice. That's my view. I wonder what Perry and Brentwood, I wonder what you think, Perry, about this. Should we ban people we don't like from coming to our country?
I think they need to be reasonable in who they're banning. I think they're banning the leader of the free world who stands up for democracy. And firstly, Nigel, I'm absolutely grateful to you. I could never repay the debt for what you've done to this country. You've absolutely saved us. But onto the topic. You're welcome to my house for dinner anytime. But I've just come from Parliament Square, and I've seen some very frightening things. I'm still a little bit shaken, and I'm
really
it's quite frightening. Yeah, I'm quite frightened. I was threatened with violence. If I had a tick sheet in my pocket, Nigel, I got called every name that would have been on it: racist, white privileged, fascist, for just challenging the debate. All I wanted to do, I went there with an open mind. I wanted to see what was being said, and when I disagreed with what I saw, and I tried to engage people in conversation, these are the things I got. And then I got threatened with violence. The stewards surrounded me. It's quite intimidating, and I wouldn't move.
And Perry, were you polite? Perry, were you polite to them?
I was polite in the beginning, and then once I see some of the things that were on the stage and being said, I tried to challenge the debate on stage. These people are just standing there listening to this violent rhetoric that's been shouted at, and all agreeing with it in a mentality where nobody decides to challenge it. So when I tried to challenge it out loud, I did, yeah. I tried to challenge it out loud, and I was close down pretty violently. And but these people, they're not challenged. They're not challenging themselves. The university lets know better. They're supposed to be educating people, and they're teaching them in closed environments and filling their heads with all this stuff that it's okay not to be challenged. If anyone challenges you, they're racist, they're bigotry. And students need to challenge themselves. This country needs to be challenged. And whether you agree or not, there should be no one-way conversation. Conversation and debate should be both ways. And it's very dangerous situation.
How many counter-demonstrators were there, Perry, apart from you?
Thousands. And in there, I was right down the front, and when Diane Abbott came on, I was told that she was courageous, and I thought, these people have been lied to. Diane Abbott didn't take up her parliamentary seat on the debate. She ducked her responsibility to these people. If she really, truly believed in Brexit, she would have voted with her heart instead of her mind and voted against Brexit, and she ducked it. And then she has the guts, apparently, to stand up in front of 1,000 people that agree with her. And apparently that's courage, apparently, standing up in front of 1,000 people.
Well, Perry, you've been quite brave. I hope you did behave yourself and didn't use bad language. You better pour yourself a glass of something and calm down a little bit, I think. Thank you. Neil Walker on Facebook says, these people just don't like centre-right politicians. Well, I think I'd rather agree with that. Look, my final thought on this whole thing is, can we please all just grow up? For goodness sake. We allow leaders from all over the world to come to our country. We may not agree with their point of view. We ourselves are an important nation. It's important for us to meet and converse on our turf and on theirs. This president, whether you like him or not, was democratically elected. He loves our country. He's good news for Britain as we head into a new world of opportunity post-Brexit. And where's our manners? The Queen's extended an invitation. I just wish this student-type politics wasn't as prevalent, or it appears to be as prevalent, in our country. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show, live here from Michigan. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7 from New York. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel. So we're going to continue this conversation with thousands protesting in Parliament Square.
Leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Doesn't it? 1.85 million people signing a petition saying that Trump should have the invitation to come to the UK withdrawn. And MPs are debating it in Parliament, and protests are taking place in Westminster and elsewhere as we speak. And we will in a moment cross live to our reporter on the ground. But bear in mind, please, this is not just ordinary folk out protesting. This has some quite significant political support. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, thinks that his trip should be suspended because of his controversial comments and potential ban on immigration. Tim Farron got banned from visiting Bristol. Steve, I'm with you. I think you're right. I think the vast majority of these anti-Trump protesters are Remainers. I think they're all the same people. I think they sign every petition going, and I think they've got to get with the real world. Steve, I thank you for your call. I move next to Lorraine in West Worcester Park. Lorraine, what do you make of this attempt to stop Trump visiting the United Kingdom?
It's absolutely absurd, absolutely undemocratic.
Mm-hmm.
And,
well, it's certainly, yeah. I mean, would it be democratic if Parliament was against him coming?
No.
Parliament. I mean, actually, the point is, Lorraine, as I understand it, and perhaps somebody listening can correct me, but as I understand it, the invitation for Trump to come to the United Kingdom, actually, it's a state visit, so it's the Queen. It's the Queen who invites him to come to the United Kingdom. So presumably, what all these protesters are trying to do, and these people signing petitions, is to put the Queen in a very embarrassing position, I'd have thought.
Absolutely. These people are not in the real world, and they're all bemoan, you know, they're all the Remainers, like the last call, totally, it's the last caller was absolutely got it on the chin. It's all the same sort of people, nothing against students, but those sort of people, not living in the real world, living in the middle of the countryside, and, you know, it's, I just can't, it's just absolutely absurd.
Lorraine, something has gone wrong. I believe something has gone wrong with some of our young people. Thinks the visit should be put on hold. John Bercow, well, as you know, didn't want him to speak inside the Palace of Westminster. We even have Conservatives like Alistair Burt, the former Foreign Office Minister, says that the optics are very bad and there should be a joint decision to delay the visit. And they're lining up, many of them, to say that Trump should not come to our country. So the question is it ever right to ban a foreign leader from visiting our country because we simply don't agree with his or her opinion? Well, my view on that is clear. It's madness. It's ludicrous. I mean, we've had Robert Mugabe visiting the country. We even had a war criminal, Japan's Emperor Hirohito in years gone past visit the country. And here we have the democratically elected leader of the United States of America and a friend of our nation, and there are people that want to ban him from coming. I think the whole thing is mad. But if you think I'm completely wrong, if you think we should ban Trump, and perhaps you've got a long list of people you want to ban, well, then let me know. And to get involved, you can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live on LBC's Facebook page right now from here in the swing state of Michigan, a state that Trump won, one of the many in the Midwest that he won. Should we ban this man or any other from coming to our country when they lead their nation because we don't like their views? I wonder what Steve in Kings Langley makes of that proposition. Steve, good evening.
Hello, mate. How are you doing?
I'm all right. What do you think?
I think you're great to start with, Nigel. I think you're just the best man in the world's politics.
In this country, in that they now are of a state of mind where if they have a different view to you, they think you shouldn't be allowed to hold your view. They think you should be banned from saying it, and that is fundamentally undemocratic and anti-democratic. Lorraine, I get your frustration. We're going to cross now live to our LBC reporter, Vincent McAvenny, who's down in Parliament Square. Vincent, what's going on down there?
Well, Nigel, we are expecting around 20,000 people here tonight. That number had turned out about 3 weeks ago, but there's around 4,000, 5,000 people here on Parliament Square. They're very vocal. They've got lots of signs calling for Trump to be impeached. EU one saying, I'm a person, not a bargaining chip. And they've been hearing from a number of speakers on the stage, MPs like Naz Shah and Diane Abbott. I've also spoken to Labour's Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, who told me why he thinks Trump shouldn't come for a state visit.
Because I don't believe that Donald Trump deserves a state visit to this country. The state visit is an honour. It's usually, well, it's an honour to world leaders, and it's a way in which we're consolidating a relationship with a world leader, and the way in which I suppose we will work with that world leader in the future. I don't think Donald Trump deserves that honour. For his behaviour in terms of his statements, the misogynistic statements against women, what he's doing to migrants within his own country, these attacks, which many have described as racist against Mexicans, this attack on people who are simply seeking refuge in his country, the way in which he's been discriminatory in terms of the closing of borders, particularly from Muslim countries. I don't think he deserves a state visit, and I don't...
Now, I just want to tell you that. But regarding the way people are talking down this country, these Remainers are deliberately trying to sabotage so that they think that they can win in the end by saying, I told you so. I think it's just pathetic.
Hang on, Steve. Steve, do you think, Steve, the people that are protesting right now in Whitehall against Trump coming to the country, do you think they're all Remainers?
I would say probably 85% are. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Listen. I live on a canal. Okay, I live on a canal boat. I travel all over the Midlands, right through London. I have massive conversations with all sorts of people, rich people, poor people, all sorts of people, every colour you can think of, every religion. And I can tell you now, the people the further you get into London, the more these people have no idea of reality. They have no idea of reality. Absolutely no idea. They do not know how the other half live.
Are they a small minority, Steve? Are they a small minority?
Not in London, no. Not in London, no. They're the large majority in London. And most of them are white, incidentally. And, you know, they're trying to deliberately sabotage what's happening. This country will be great. It is a great country. And I'm just hoping, what are we going to say, Nigel, if Le Pen wins the presidency in France in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, or Geert Wilders? They're not coming over as well. Is that what we're going to say? I mean,
do you know what? Do you know what, Steve? I think these protesters would like to ban anybody that they don't like, and we're seeing much of this behaviour actually going on throughout our universities, where even someone like Jermaine Greer